You were the child who never made a sound. While other children were a whirlwind of demands, scraped knees, and loud laughter, you were different. You were low maintenance. You were the one the adults praised for being so well behaved, so mature for your age, and most of all, so quiet. But there is a hidden, jagged edge to that silence. To the outside world, your quietness looked like peace, but to you, it was a high-stakes performance. It was the architecture of a fortress you built before you even knew how to speak your own name. Think back to those moments. The way you'd walk down the hallway on your tiptoes, not because you were playing a game, but because you had subconsciously mapped every creaking floorboard in the house. The way you learned to read the atmospheric pressure of a room the second you stepped inside, noticing the slight tension in a parent, a jaw, or the sharp metallic clinking of a coffee cup, and knowing instantly that the safest thing for you to be was invisible. This is the core paradox of the silent child. The very thing that saved you then is the thing that is sabotaging you now. In that house, silence was your shield. It protected you from the storm of a parent's temper, the weight of their depression, or the suffocating expectations of a family that didn't have room for your complexity. You traded your authenticity for safety. You sacrificed your voice to buy a fragile peace. But now, as an adult, that shield has become a cage. You find yourself unable to speak up in meetings, paralyzed when you need to set a boundary, and feeling like a ghost in your own relationships. You aren't just quiet. You are a master of survival who has forgotten how to live outside of the shadows. Today, we are going to dismantle the fortress, stone by stone, and find the person who was silenced so long ago. To understand the silent child, we have to stop looking at silence as a personality trait and start seeing it for what it truly is: a neurological adaptation. When a child grows up in an environment where their needs are met with volatility, neglect, or overwhelming fragility, their brain undergoes a structural pivot. This is not a choice. It is a biological mandate. The first pillar of this fortress is hypervigilance. In a healthy environment, a child's nervous system is allowed to remain in a state of rest and digest. But for the child who had to be too quiet, the brain's alarm system, the amygdala, is perpetually stuck in the on position. You became a human seismograph. While other kids were focused on their toys, you were subconsciously monitoring the micro expressions of the adults around you. You weren't just observing. You were calculating the probability of a social or emotional earthquake. Neurologically, this means your default mode network, the part of the brain active when we are at rest, became wired for threat detection instead of imagination. You didn't learn how to daydream. You learned how to simulate scenarios. You practiced conversations in your head 1,000 times before saying a single word, vetting every syllable for potential triggers that might upset the equilibrium of the household. This leads us to the second pillar, the Fawn Response. Most people are familiar with fight, flight, or freeze, but for the quiet child, fawning is the primary survival mechanism. Fawning is the act of appeasing a threat to ensure safety. It is the tactical use of niceness and quietness to remain below the radar. In the animal kingdom, some creatures use camouflage to blend into the foliage to avoid predators. In the human family, the child uses silence to blend into the wallpaper. You learn that if you had no needs, you could never be a burden. If you never made a mistake, you could never be the target. If you were nothing, you were safe. This process results in a profound psychological state known as self-erasure. In clinical terms, we might look at this through the lens of avoidant attachment or parentification. Parentification occurs when the roles are reversed, and the child feels an unspoken responsibility to regulate the parent's emotions. You became the emotional caretaker by remaining silent, because your silence was the only gift you could give to a parent who is already overwhelmed. You learn to shrink your soul to fit into the narrow spaces left behind by the bigger, louder personalities in your life. This adaptation has a devastating effect on the developing prefrontal cortex, the area of the brain responsible for self-expression and decision-making. When you are constantly in a state of survival, the creative and assertive parts of your brain are starved of energy. The brain literally prioritizes the survival circuits over the identity circuits. You didn't just lose your voice. Your brain decided that having a voice was too expensive a luxury to afford. Think of your psyche as a house where the lights are always dimmed. You didn't dim them because you liked the dark. You dimmed them because you didn't want to draw attention to the fact that anyone was home. This sustained state of high arousal silence rewires the nervous system to view visibility as danger and authenticity as a threat to survival. You aren't shy. You are a veteran of a war that was fought in whispers. Your body still thinks that if you make too much noise, the world will collapse. The tragedy of the child who is too quiet is not that they had nothing to say, but that they held a funeral for their true self before they even reached puberty. This is the invisible grief, a mourning process for a person who was never allowed to exist. While your peers were testing boundaries, making messes, and discovering their I am, you were mastering the art of the I am not. There is a profound emotional tax on a life spent in the shadows. When you prioritize being easy over being real, you commit a slow, rhythmic act of self-betrayal. Every time you swallowed a grievance, every time you muffled a laugh that felt too loud, and every time you hid your tears to avoid making a scene, you were teaching your soul that its presence was a nuisance. This is the weight of sacrificed authenticity. As Carl Jung famously posited, the most damaging thing in the life of a child is the unlived life of the parent. Often, the quiet child is the repository for the family's unspoken tension. You became the coolant for the engine of your household. If you were silent, the engine wouldn't overheat. But what happens to the coolant? It absorbs the heat until it reaches a boiling point that no one else can see. You took on the psychological burden of your environment, acting as a buffer between reality and the fragile egos of those meant to protect you. Philosophically, this echoes the concept of the shadow. Because your loud traits, your anger, your exuberant joy, your demanding needs were deemed dangerous or bad by your environment, you didn't just suppress them, you exiled them. You pushed them into the dark corners of your subconscious. The result is a persistent, gnawing sense of hollowness. You feel like an actor in your own life because the lead role, your authentic self, is locked in a basement you built when you were 6 years old. The core fear driving this behavior is the fear of abandonment through visibility. There is a terrifying logic in the child's mind. If they truly see me, if they see my mess, my anger, my hunger, they will realize I am too much to handle. Then they will leave. This creates a life of conditional belonging. You feel loved only to the extent that you are useful, and you are only useful when you are invisible. Consider the myth of Echo from Ovid's Metamorphoses. Echo was a mountain nymph who was cursed to never speak her own thoughts, only to repeat the last words of others. The silent child is a modern Echo. You have spent so long mirroring the needs of others, anticipating their moods, and reflecting their expectations that you have lost the ability to generate your own original sound. This is the high price of peace. You bought a house of cards with the currency of your soul. The emotional cost is a profound loneliness of the scene. People see the quiet, dependable version of you, but they don't see you. And because they don't see the real you, their love feels like a mistake. It feels like they are loving a mask, leaving the person behind the mask more isolated than ever. You are starving for connection in a room full of people who think you are already full. This grief is heavy because it is unacknowledged. People don't bring flowers to the funeral of a child's spontaneity. They don't offer condolences for the loss of a voice that was never heard. But the pain is there, vibrating in the silence, waiting for the day you finally decide that being good is no longer worth the cost of being gone. The silence of a child doesn't vanish when they blow out the candles on their 18th birthday. Instead, it transmutes. It becomes a set of sophisticated, invisible scripts that dictate every interaction, every career move, and every romantic choice. You are no longer that small child hiding in a bedroom, but the internal architecture remains the same. You have become an adult who is functionally too quiet, not out of a lack of things to say, but because your body still registers self-expression as a life-threatening risk. In adulthood, these are no longer traits. They are survival scars. Let's look at the 6 primary ways this childhood silence manifests in your life today. You have the invisibility cloak in the workplace. You are likely the most reliable person on your team, yet you are the least recognized. You do the work of 3 people but shrink during meetings. When it's time for a promotion, you are overlooked not because of your performance, but because you have mastered the art of being unobtrusive. You wait to be discovered rather than making yourself known, because your nervous system tells you that standing out is synonymous with being a target. You have the burden of the low-maintenance partner. In relationships, you pride yourself on being the partner who doesn't drama. You don't ask for much. You accommodate your partner's schedule, and you swallow your petty grievances. But this isn't health. It's conflict avoidance. Eventually, this leads to a cold burnout, where you wake up one day feeling zero connection to the person lying next to you, simply because you never allowed them to meet the real, high-maintenance version of yourself. You are hyper-attunement to others' discomfort. You are an emotional sponge. If a coworker is slightly stressed or a friend is unusually quiet, you feel it as a physical pressure in your chest. You reflexively try to fix the vibe of the room, often by becoming even quieter or more helpful, because a cracked atmosphere feels like an impending disaster. You have the delayed response phenomenon. Have you ever had an argument or a difficult conversation where you stayed silent, only to think of 100 things you should have said 3 hours later? This isn't a lack of intelligence, it's dissociation. In the moment of tension, your brain goes offline to protect you. Your survival brain shuts down your verbal centers to ensure you do not say the wrong thing. You have decision paralysis and the loss of want. If someone asks you, "What do you want for dinner?" or "Where do you see yourself in 5 years?" you might feel a strange, hollow panic. When you spend 2 decades suppressing your desires to keep the peace, the muscle of wanting actually atrophies. You aren't being easygoing. You are genuinely disconnected from your own internal compass. You have chronic fatigue and the social hangover because being in public requires a constant state of hypervigilance, scanning faces, monitoring your posture, editing your words. You are perpetually exhausted. Your quietness is actually an immense energy drain. You aren't an introvert in the traditional sense. You are a sentry who is tired of standing guard. The process of unlearning begins with a brutal but necessary realization. You are not your silence. These behaviors are not your personality. They are a set of tools you use to survive a situation you are no longer in. The first step in unlearning is the act of witnessing. You must stop gaslighting yourself. Stop saying, "I'm just a quiet person," and start saying, "I am currently protecting myself from a threat that is not there." When you feel that lump in your throat in a meeting, or that urge to apologize for simply existing, name it. Recognize it as the little guardian inside you who is still trying to keep the floorboards from creaking. Healing isn't about becoming the loudest person in the room. It's about internal sovereignty. It's about realizing that the storm you were waiting for has passed, and you are allowed to put down the umbrella. You must begin the terrifying work of being inconvenient. You must learn that your too muchness is not a flaw, but the very essence of your humanity that has been waiting patiently in the dark. Healing the silent child is not about learning how to scream. It is about learning how to exist without permission. For years, you have lived as a guest in your own life, perpetually checking the house rules to see if your presence is still welcome. The path to wholeness requires you to move from being a guest to being the homeowner. This process is often called inner child reprinting. It begins when you, the adult, look back at that small, hypervigilant child and offer them the one thing they never had: protection. That child was quiet because they had to be their own bodyguard. To heal, you must step into that role for them. You must tell that younger version of yourself, you can be loud now, you can be messy, you can be angry. I am big enough to handle all of it, and I am not going anywhere. A vital component of this healing is what we call shadow work. You must go into the basement of your psyche and reclaim the unacceptable parts of yourself. Your anger is not bad. It is the part of you that knows when your boundaries are being crossed. Your sadness is not a burden. It is the part of you that honors what you have lost. Your neediness is simply your humanity. When you reintegrate these parts, you stop being a flat, silent image and start becoming a three-dimensional human being. This journey also involves the radical act of being inconvenient. If you have spent your life being easy to handle, your first steps toward health will feel like a betrayal. Setting a boundary will feel like an attack. Asking for what you want will feel like a crime. But you must lean into that discomfort. You must learn to tolerate the temporary noise of other people as reactions to your voice. Healing is the realization that your value is not tied to how comfortable you make the people around you. As the psychiatrist Bessel van der Kolk wrote in The Body Keeps the Score, being able to feel safe with other people is probably the single most important aspect of mental health. Safe connections are fundamental to meaningful and satisfying lives. Your healing goal is not just to speak, but to find a safe connection where your voice doesn't have to be perfect to be heard. In the Japanese art of kintsugi, broken pottery is repaired with gold, making the cracks the most beautiful and strongest part of the object. Your silence was a crack, a break in your development caused by an environment that couldn't hold your wholeness. But as you begin to speak, as you begin to unsilence your history, you are filling those cracks with the gold of self-awareness and resilience. You were never too quiet. You were a masterpiece waiting for a room that was quiet enough to hear your whisper. Now, that room is the one you build for yourself. You do not need to be fixed because you were never broken, you were only hidden. The goal is not to become someone else. It is to finally become the person you were before you learned that you had to hide to survive. Take a breath. Feel the space your body occupies in this moment. Notice that the world did not end because you took a breath. You are here. You are seen. And you no longer have to ask for permission to stay. If this resonated with you, it is a sign that the little guardian inside you is ready to take a break. You've done enough. It's okay to be heard now.